Now, my harimai, to all people of the heart, the wonderful audience who've been here for a few hours, my distinguished colleagues, starting with the keynote, Professor Paul Spoonley, who influence and impact our nation and each other. Tēnā koutou, inga iwi, inga rio, inga monga, inga awa, tēnā koutou katoa. Kātu tahi tātou, ki te momahara, I tewa mamai o te iwi, no reira ka nui te aroha. I share the sorrow that this remembrance recalls, and as a nation, we grieve together. The tragic events of 15th March 2019 in Christchurch struck our Aotearoa like a thunderbolt. Turu turu ti au, the world weeps. As the haunting grief casts its dark shadow 1 year on, I bear witness to faltering dreams, rebuilding dreams, and the infinitely varied aspects of diversity. As many of my previous panelists and the keynote have already alluded to, religious diversity calls for developing a new repertoire to rethink and remold our citadels of ideological imperialism. A repertoire, a lexicon, and vocabulary that allows individuals to think and talk about diverse religions in more deep and meaningful ways, and that gives permission for people to bring their sacred selves to all aspects of their experience, yet being mindful of the need to honor the neighbor and stranger in our midst, for we too were once strangers in this land. In fact, religion, which is supposed to help us cultivate the sense of the sacred, inviolability of every single human being, often seems to reflect the violence and desperation of societies and to evaporate our common humanity. Once upon a time, there was a young man. A lot of the people who are radicalized tend to be young men, troubled by the balancing of free speech and hate speech. He goes to his tipuna to solve his dilemma. The tipuna answers in her inimitable style. Free speech opens doors to plurality. Dialogue for multidimensional perspectives and rationally compassionate actions. But where do we draw the line? How can we address the slippery ground of unfettered hate to ensure a robust public discourse and freedom that is the beating heart of democracy? Freedom and hatred must be conceptualized as a process against a backdrop of geography, history, social, political, and technological contexts. For many, activism and free speech means you are cool. But what kind of activism is the question? Bombing of Muslims, Jews, Christians? Responsibility and balance is necessary for ensuring free speech. And I'm repeating here a number of things that my previous panelists have said. Without dialogue, we have free rein for vitriolic hate speech. Anything goes permissiveness, building bastions of anti-immigration as well as anti-white narratives. Read a lot of what's being written in the Middle East, for example. Obscenity, vile messages, radicalization, and faith-based violence. Lack of dialogue and lack of rationally compassionate actions can serve as a breeding ground, creating a terrestrial climate and echo chambers to fertilize and foster violence, intimidation, and subversive platforms such as 8chan, 4chan, Gab, and what? Or the dark web that Paul referred to. Online data and news diets are peopled by dark figures and it is important to understand, and I repeat, that hate crime is a process rather than a discrete event. Extremists use the rhetoric of threat, otherness, and invasion to increase online polarization, including fake news, deep fake, and power to information insurgents. It is noteworthy, and this is from research from the British Journal of Criminology, that although not all people exposed to hate material commit hate crimes, all hate crime criminals are likely to have at some stage been exposed to hate material. No doubt, the algorithms used for data mining and data processing filter, rank, and move individuals towards certain sites. Many internet platforms, code writers, and programmers sign no code of ethics and are not necessarily interested in principles of fairness, objectivity, and civility, notions often deemed as antiquated. Idiotology, in contrast to ideology, in various disguises is constantly recycled, creating a combustible, toxic cocktail of hate and misinformation. Stoked by moral outrage and noxious disquiet, it is an unsettling paradox that years of harmonious behavior seem to be wiped out in one fell swoop, and latent stereotypes manifest their ugly face. In many instances, our worst selves have surfaced with a miasma of microaggressions. This toxicity seems to spur diminished faith and hope in humanity's ability and competency to handle increasingly complex, large-scale, ambiguous crisis situations. So hand washing is a physical thing that we can quickly do. But as was mentioned, I mean, how do we hand wash? Like Pilate did, for example, with reference to hate speech. Social media enables disinhibition, de-individuation, and provides a safe haven and shield for hate speech perpetrators. And of course, lone actors can also be self-radicalized via the internet. This wicked interplay can only subside if we handle threat perceptions with common sense restraint and short, medium, and long-term strategies embellished with pragmatic Kiwi ingenuity. Mori tu, mori ora, mori noho, mori mate. Standing and moving together begets prosperity, whereas idleness and remaining stagnant begets poverty. But permanent change takes time and is an evolving process. There must be a multi-pronged, concerted strategy at educational and organizational levels rather than relying solely on our government to initiate changes. We must do what we can within our own span of control. For change can be effervescent unless buttressed by continuous messages of how to interact with diversity. I want to emphasize a virtuous cycle through conversations, engagement with diverse groups, reflection, and hopefully change. In the enigmatic task of transcending history through a wise praxis, there is the necessity to understand that the particular is woven into the universal. We must remember every day the possibility of fracturing universes where ideological imperialism dominates. We must have reflective stances and accountable actions to create and illuminate our better selves through kaitiakitanga as guardians and inheritors of this planet. It is again poignant to remember that mori tu, mori ora, standing and moving together, begets prosperity. Therefore, my final message today is, fill your hearts with dreams. Embrace multidimensional perspectives. Act with rational compassion. And put back into the kete, or the basket of life, for the privilege of living. And for the miracle of each day in our journey on this beloved earth. Mori tu, mori ora. Thank you.